sacrament. You can see into the mind of God talking to other Rastas about these mysteries. Now that's interesting because psychedelic research is just sort of beginning to get underway. Cannabis is although it's not classified as a major psychedelic, I think it has very interesting effects which reveal the soul, which is what the word psychedelic means. And I think it should be legalised. I'm with the Rastas on this. I think we'd have a much more peaceful and enlightened world if it was, and if people knew how to use it properly, which is in a sacred communion, not as a sort of party drug, but as something really sacred. So, and they argue that Moses also knew about the wonderful impact of cannabis. They say that the prophets in the Old Testament that they love, Ezekiel, probably Enoch himself, that's why they're having all these holy visions, because they know how to use psychedelics correctly. Maybe they're right.
I was going to say that the Book of Enoch just sounds like someone on psychedelics.
Well, that's yeah, but it was written a very long time ago. And the other thing to say about the Book of Enoch, which is really interesting, and I've not had this conversation with the Rastafarians, is that we know for certain that Jesus Christ read this book. The Book of Enoch was already old by the time Jesus was a young man. How do we know this? Well, we know it for two main reasons. One is that it's actually quoted in the New Testament. In one of the letters, there's a direct quotation from the Book of Enoch, which proves it was in circulation among his disciples. Secondly, in his teachings, he's always quoting bits from the Book of Enoch. The concept of being the Son of Man, you read that in the New Testament, you think, what does he mean, Son of Man? What's all that? Because sometimes he's the Son of God, and sometimes he's the Son of Man. It gets very confusing. Well, that phrase, the Son of Man, is lifted from the Book of Enoch. Because at one point in the heavenly journey, Enoch sees someone who is like God's right hand in the heaven world, who is presented as the Son of Man, and who is then said he will be coming to earth. So the whole of Jesus' mission is, in a sense, written down in the Book of Enoch. Only when you read that does the whole New Testament story make sense, in my opinion. And I believe Jesus read that, and as probably a very, ambitious, intelligent young man, and said, we need the Son of Man to come and sort all this mess out, and took on the mission. And that's why he says, I am the Son of Man. Now, the official Jewish tradition wasn't going to have that because you weren't allowed to read the Book of Enoch. It was heretical in their mind because it was too close to the bone. The other reason that I think it's certain that Jesus knew the book is because in the Essene community in Qumran, which I've been to, archaeologists discovered all these Dead Sea Scrolls, they're called, in fragments which they've interpreted, commented on and translated. And they're housed in a special museum in Jerusalem, which I've been to. One of the books that had the largest number of fragments in Qumran was the Book of Enoch. All these Essenes were reading it. It was like their favourite book. They had most of the books that are in the conventional Bible, like the Book of Isaiah, the Book of Jeremiah, Genesis, Kings, all that stuff. But they also had the Book of Enoch. So, go figure. I mean, it's known that Jesus and John used to hang around the Essenes. Some people even argue they were Essenes. They probably went to Qumran.
Wait, what are Essenes again, sorry?
They're an esoteric sect of Jews living around the time of Christ. And archaeologists have discovered this site called Qumran, where they found these scriptures, which include the Book of Enoch. And I've got actually, could you pass me the third book down? No, sorry, fourth book down. Yeah.
Okay.
That one.
Thank you.
Cheers. Okay, so this book is an absolute to die for must-have in my library book. It's called The Secret Initiation of Jesus at Qumran by Robert Feather. And I met Robert Feather when he was, announcing the book, The Essene Mysteries of John the Baptist. It's a sleuth work. It's signed by the author. I hope he's still alive. Well done, Robert. Keep it up. he was asked to comment, because he was a metallurgist and a member of the Metallurgical Society. He founded the journal Metallurgist and Materials Technology, and was which is the official journal of the Institution of Metallurgists. That was in his early life. And then he was asked to comment on the copper scroll that they found in Qumran. In Qumran there was a discovery, not only these papyrus scrolls that were in jars, but also they found a scroll made of copper, which was unbelievable, and he was involved in reading it and unraveling it and deciphering it. And then he was asked to comment on where the copper came from. And he discovered it came from Egypt. And that began his lifelong quest into, well, what are these Essenes doing in touch with Egypt? And what he discovered and what he explains is that he reckoned the Essenes were an esoteric Egyptian branch of Judaism that predated the temple cult in Jerusalem. They looked on the Jerusalem cult of Judaism as a sort of deviation, and that they were being authentic to the real Egyptian origin of Judaism itself, Moses, etc. And so then he argues that, well, then Jesus and John the Baptist were in on this tradition. And he gives, it's a masterpiece of a book, seriously well worth reading. And it sort of fits in with the Rastafarian idea that the Book of Enoch is quite important, and he discusses it in here. Robert, very important author. So that's why I think the Book of Enoch was read by Jesus. I'm convinced of it. And in my commentary on the Gospels and the Gnostic Gospels, I've always explained that in detail. And that's why I took out a year in my time in the castle in Scotland to do a commentary on the Book of Enoch. I don't know anyone else has done such an in-depth study of the Book of Enoch as I've done. And I also did Enoch, that's Enoch 1, which was written, it's thought, around the same time as the Book of Genesis. So a long time ago, 600 AD, 800 BC possibly, which is when Genesis was coming into written form. But there's also an Enoch 2 and an Enoch 3, which were written. Enoch 2 was written almost exactly around the time of Jesus. He may have read parts of it. It's thought it was written in Alexandria. Enoch 3 was written later in a Jewish Kabbalist context in Mesopotamia. Jesus obviously didn't know about that third one. He may have known about Enoch 2, and in my commentary on Enoch 2 I pointed out some of the passages. I don't think the Rastas have it in their Bible, either of the later two Enochs. Personally, I think they should all be in the Bible. If I was Archbishop of Canterbury, I would add all three Enochs to the Bible. It would make it much more interesting, and it would fill the churches more, in my opinion. Because at the moment, only a few old ladies go and light candles on a Sunday.
So, what is it that makes the Rastafari Christian rather than Jewish?
They believe in Jesus Christ. He was the special messenger sent by God.
So it is
to
literally
wake us
all the
up.
same as the Christian Bible that they believe in.
Yeah.
Added Enoch.
And adding Enoch, which
Okay,
makes all
right.
the difference. It's like adding yeast to flour.
Yeah.
It makes the bread. And it's just, to me, scandalous that it was not allowed into the Bible. And it's just by semi-literate monkish types who didn't want to know the real McCoy. The good news is, how did the Book of Enoch reach the West again? Was thanks to a Scottish Freemason who lived in a castle in Scotland, James Bruce, an archaeologist, explorer, savant, typical Scotsman of the 18th century, who went on a walkabout, and he went overland to Ethiopia, passing through France, and he became friends with the king of Ethiopia at the time. We're talking like the 1750s, 60s. And he became such good friends with the king. I think he taught his children, because he was a learned guy. He was a Freemason, right? And the king said, "What can I do in return?" When he announced he was going home, he said, "You know that Book of Enoch? I really wouldn't mind a few copies of that. And he gave them 3 copies to take home of the Book of Enoch, because James Bruce realised its significance, which was pretty amazing, really. He left 1 copy in the French Royal Library, because he was friends with the librarian on his way home in Paris. He gave 1 copy to the Bodleian Library at the University of Oxford, and he kept 1 in his castle in Scotland. I love James Bruce, and I think there should be like a film made about this guy, and the impact of the Book of Enoch. It's just not known, this stuff. When I discovered it, living in a castle in Scotland, that's why I did the commentary. It's an homage to Bruce and his adventures, and because I believe that knowledge will gradually, save the world from ignorance. I think if only that all the Muslims, all the Christians, all the Jews read the Book of Enoch, preferably all 3, listen to my commentaries, they'd all put the guns down, like overnight, because it's just so stupid to be killing each other. We're brothers and sisters. And if they join the Rastas and learn how to use the holy sacrament of cannabis, a divine plant, intelligently, that would only augment their desire to make peace. So...
Is it only cannabis that they recognise?
Well, I don't know. There's probably, of the Rastas I've met, that is the main thing. And that's what, the Wailers used to do this. Back in the reggae days in the 70s, when I went to hear the Wailers live at Bristol University, that was the main message.
But that's different than, because I doubt the culture is very separate from, it's almost like a culture in its own, separate from the religion.
Yes, except that what you've got to realise is that the reggae groups, and the Wailers particularly, were influenced by the Rastas. They regarded themselves as the background music. Of course,
but that's why I ask about whether it was just cannabis, because I wouldn't be surprised if in the text it was cannabis as well as a variety of other different, not necessarily psychedelics, but a variety of other different sacred plants. Yeah.
Yes, I'm sure. I mean, I've been looking forward to having these conversations with Rastafarian intellectuals, and I'm hoping maybe some here will get in touch and come visit, and we'll have some holy discussions, and we can talk about the books of Enoch. They're more in Britain, obviously. Jamaica is part of the British Commonwealth. There aren't, I don't know if there's many Rastas in France, but anyway, you're welcome to come and visit. Now, having said all that...
Not so many in Betet.
Not many in Betet, no. So that's that one. That's very interesting. They believe in spiritual knowledge rather than belief. So they're a Gnostic form of Christianity. They believe in love of nature, voluntary vegetarianism. So, they like vegetarians and vegans, but that's up to you. They're committed to justice to the Africans that were enslaved, and the return of Africans to the Holy Land, if they want, in Africa, particularly in Ethiopia, is like fulfilling the promise of God. They like long hair because if you cut it, it brings weakness. So, like Samson, or the American Indian tribes, the same. You don't cut your hair, let it grow into dreadlocks. And it resembles the mane of the lion, which is the symbol of Judah. So Haile Selassie was regarded as a descendant of Solomon and David, and the lion throne. Just on a little slight footnote, just to say that in my discovery, in my study of the 99 Names of Peace, I discovered something about Haile Selassie that disappointed me. I always thought, what a great man, But when he was ruler of Ethiopia, presiding over the country, he privileged a particular, the original language of the Ethiopian people in which their scriptures are written down. And he persecuted another group called the Oromos, who spoke a different language called Oromo. And I've got Oromo in the 99 Names of Peace, and there's 35 million Oromo speakers in Ethiopia and surrounding countries. And quite a lot of them are Muslim. And Haile Selassie was sort of into, no, Ethiopian, we're the best. And they made it illegal to educate people in Oromo or speak in Oromo. And I think this adulation of Haile Selassie is just slightly suspect. It's sad, you know, because I've always thought what a great man, but even he made mistakes. So I suppose it's a lesson in human fallibility. And that's why I think we need to all sit around the table and compare notes and recognise that no culture is without sin. No culture is you know, completely blameless. And that therefore we need collective salvation, as it were. So anyway, that's just a little footnote. Right, let's move on. Is that okay? That's
Great.
Do you know more about Rastafarianism now?
Oh, sure.
Okay. It's fascinating, yeah. Okay, Armel, what's your one?
Or maybe I pass because it took a long time.
No. Let's. We'll do it anyway. Do share. Very important.
No, but humanism, Marxism.
Ah,
Yeah, let's do it.
okay. Right.
Because
Okay.
I have an idea beside this one. Because I guess it's one path to the collapse of our civilization. Misinterpretation of Marxism or materialism. That's why I'm interested in that topic.
Okay.
How can a philosophy, I don't know Marxism indeed, I can put away transcendence. For me, it's difficult to understand.
Ok. Est-ce que vous pouvez expliquer en français le détail que vous voulez comprendre?
Oui. Ben, dans le marxisme, qui est une philosophie a priori matérialiste que je connais mal,
Oui.
et ça m'intéresse dans le sens où notre civilisation est devenue matérialiste.
Oui.
Dans quelle mesure ce marxisme, quelle est son origine en fait?
Okay, thank you. Yes, so, yeah, he's interested in Marxism as a materialist tradition and how much that impacted on Western thought, world philosophy, and to what extent that's contributed to the decline of our civilization. I think is these are all really important topics, and you know, we've been discussing this around the dinner table here in the Museum of the Muses. You know, what is capitalism? Does it have a future? And you probably would like to share one particular book that's influenced you called
Capitalist Realism by Mark Fisher.
Right, Capitalist Realism by Mark Fisher, which is a book I promised to read, and I will. Again, very critical of capitalism, like
It's
Marx
very,
was.
very important book.
Yeah, had a
Capitalism.
huge impact on you. Yeah, yeah. And so, and there are many, you know, so, okay. I'm interested in this because my mother was a strong Marxist. When I was growing up as a little boy, in our house in Brighton, I was told, when I asked her what's the meaning of life as a little boy, 5 or 6, I said, read Marx. And of course I tried at the age of 7, you know, what is this? And failed utterly because it was nonsensical. And I then revisited it doing my history degree at the University of London because obviously Marxism has walked across the pages of modern history with great, you know, impact. And then I studied history of political ideas as part of that degree, and I read Marx in detail. And I read commentators and critics of Marx and pro and contra and all the rest of it. And I wrote a very important essay. If you want to understand my thinking about this thing, you need to read this essay that I wrote in my 3rd term at the University of London for the course I was doing. And that was, of course, the 80s. So Marxism was still the official, you know, ideology of Russia and Eastern Europe and China and 35 countries around the world. And I was interested in the impact of Freemasonry on the birth of Marxism, which is quite a niche subject and quite very unexplored. I think I'm one of the few people, maybe there are 6 of us in modern history, who've actually written about this stuff. I wrote about it in depth, using all the resources, the Freemasonic Library in London and also in Paris and Scotland. And it was before the internet, so this is all done with libraries, British Library. And I discovered that Marx moved in a world shaped by Freemasonic intellectuals. I discovered the Lodge of the Nine Sisters, had Kenne, who was the founder of economics. All the sort of categories of thought that Marx is using were actually very influenced by Freemasonry. That's the first thing I discovered. And so I thought that was interesting. And his idea of history having a purpose, a goal, a telos, it's going to end in the triumphant success of communism. That was a Masonic kind of idea that we're going somewhere, there's a goal to get. And we're building knowledge. This is a metaphor that he uses all the time. We're building the revolution, building society up. That's again a very Masonic allegorical symbol, because Freemasons like to think they're building the Temple of Wisdom, or the Temple of Solomon. And they build, every time you go to the lodge, you put another stone into the invisible temple. And that was a Hegelian concept. Hegel said we're building the invisible temple of God, because that has to be everywhere. It's not the church down the road, it's us collectively building the temple of God. The idea of why do you work with the lumpen proletariat, the poorest in Marxism, they're the children of God, is because, and I argue in my study, that he was influenced particularly by Kabbalistic ideas. Most people think Marx was anti-religious and that he was an atheist and a materialist. Actually, if you study the text properly and you read his life story and his history, I argue he was more influenced by esoteric thought than anyone seems to have realized. And that he was particularly interested in the Lurianic Kabbalah, which talks about tikkun and agrees that the world is shattered. And the reason it's shattered is because the light of God tried to be contained in the vessel of us humans, and it was too strong. We couldn't contain that light, so it shattered. And that is the Kabbalistic version of the fall of man. It's a bit like the Book of Enoch story. And I believe Karl Marx was familiar with all this stuff, and he reinterpreted it to mean, okay, so the world's shattered, evil is out of the jiffy bag, and we've all got to put it back in. And so he thought, well, if we can bring the poorest back into the kingdom, everyone else will be taken care of too. Now that's a kind of Kabbalistic idea of redemption and tikkun. And there's a journal in America, if you want to understand all this, called Tikkun, which is the Jewish word for redemptive prayer and spiritual work. Founded by Rabbi Michael Lerner, who wrote a book called Revolutionary Love. And he's expounding a kind of, he's saying of the left that they need to bring back spirituality, and that the mistake was to go in the direction of pure materialism. So to come to that point, why did we ever think he was a materialist? If he was actually an esotericist, he was a baptized Christian as well, so I think he was an advanced thinker. And in my studies, which I did and which I've published, I think there's a lot of evidence for what I'm saying. I think he was a materialist in this sense, that materialism as we know it developed in the medical schools of antiquity. They used the theories of Democritus in Egypt and places because they wanted to understand the body and how to help heal it. All doctors, physicians, are materialists. They deal with your body, your bones, your lungs, cutting out the cancer with surgery. And I think materialism was never intended to be a complete and absolute explanation of reality. That's to give it too much privilege. It was the atomic theory was an attempt to explain how physical forms work and then how we can help repair them. And I think Marx understood that and saw himself as a healer, you know, ultimately, in this long class war. However, we don't have all these, you know, no one's gone through the complete works of Marx, including all the correspondence, and gone into all this stuff from this perspective, right? What I would love is to do that, or to get a team of scholars doing that. What I've done in my own little humble way is do a commentary on Das Kapital, which I'm halfway through. And I'm trying to explain where Marx was right and where he was wrong. Because I think that there was a blind spot in Marx, and I've said this before, but I'll say it again, the fatal error he made, and I don't think Mark Fisher points this out, Marx doesn't seem to realise the huge connection between militarism, the advancement of military technology, and the ever consolidation of capital in fewer and fewer hands. So the wars of history are about wealth conflicts, and they have a class element. And the military companies providing the equipment that the boys are using to kill each other are the guys that make the profits. And it's been always that way since the Stone Age, when the chipped rock that made a bladed stone was the weapon of choice, you know, and you stick it on a stick and it becomes an axe. They found battle sites in North Germany, 1200 BC is the first battlefield archaeologists found in Europe. Somebody made those weapons. They were bronze, copper type things, and stone. So my take on Marx's analysis of the role of technology in society is that he thought if we understood that, we could control all that by nationalising all the factories, that would lead to communist utopia. I think he left out the fact of the military-industrial complex, which is the thing that defeated every time Marxism, which I think is a semi-complete theory of capital. Every time Marxism has been applied, it's ended with wars and disastrous civil wars and mass killings. If you think about Russia, it just was a catastrophic experience for the Russian people. They're only just awakening from. And Ukraine, I mean, it's still going on. I'm reading the biography of Pol Pot, this, again, a Marxist, who applied these theories and decimated the Cambodian people. It was the same in China. It led to mass killings and wars. Now, I reckon I've analysed why, and I think it's because of Marx's blind spot to peace. He didn't understand the importance of peace. And he was once invited by Victor Hugo to go to a peace conference in Geneva. Very important, prestigious thing. Late 19th century, everyone was there. And he refused. He wrote back a letter saying, why should I come to peace conference? I'm not interested in peace. I want class war and the victory of the working classes. And I think that was a fatal error. So we have a lot of cleaning up work to do. It's like history is like a series of typhoons or hurricanes. We're getting them now. And scholars like me, well, our job is to clean up after the mess and try and tidy it all up before the next one hits, and to try and perfect our tools of thinking so that we can understand what's going on. So anyway, I don't know if that helps explain a bit.
Thank you very much. It raises a lot of questions, especially what are the sounds of Marx, spiritual sounds, if I can say,
sure.
Of Marx.
There is a deeper spiritual story going on in that.
Yeah.
And some Marxists have known, Ernst Bloch, who wrote about hope, he's a philosopher of Marxism.
Okay.
Lukács was another, you know. There were some great minds working on this, Gramsci in Italy. Yes. Anyway, read my book about this. It's only a short book about the esoteric origins of Marxism as a first thing. Because I am literally, I think, the first guy to talk about all this stuff. Although I did notice recently that there was a German university offering a PhD, funded PhD, into the esoteric origins of socialism. Not just Marxism, but generally. To what extent socialism as an ideology grew out of religious motivations and stuff. So somebody's been reading my books.
I think the
Exciting.
esoteric stuff is very interesting, and your book sounds very interesting. Although I feel like you're slightly ungenerous to the breadth of Marxism. Like Marxism is very, very, very broad. Like just you say Marxism like it means one thing. Marxism means 1,000 things. Marx means one thing, arguably, but that's why Marxism means 1,000 things, because people are, you know.
Well, thank you. No, I hear the point you're making, and it's not that I'm not respecting either Marxists intellectually, and I've mentioned a few that I respect. I was commenting on the way it's being politically applied, and you know, I've studied Stalin and Lenin and Mao and now Pol Pot in detail, and I think that they did history a disservice by their misapplication
And
of the ideas.
they're all authoritarian Marxists.
Right. And
So
they've caused a lot of headaches to
Yeah,
people.
sure.
But Marx himself had authoritarian tendencies.
Yeah.
We mustn't over-romanticize
No,
them.
this is true.
He did have, and he was horrible and beastly to people he didn't like. Even old Pierre Leroux he had a satirical way of writing that could demolish people in a couple of sentences. And he saw himself, I mean, it's interesting that Rudolf Steiner said he was the reincarnation of a knight from the early Frankish Empire and thought in terms of battling, him and Engels. Now, I haven't got a clue where Steiner got that from or if it's true, but he is a warrior, Marx. And I'm not, I'm a druid, you see. I don't think one fights to get truth. One creates a space in which the truth can arrive. And my mother was a warrior, you know, she was a Marxist in that true sense. And we used to have fantastic arguments, but they were respectful. And she did teach me, and one thing I will say in Marx's honour is that I have a wonderful book here in the house called Marxism and World Literature. Marx was one of the most highly read men of the 19th century. He was a polyglot, he spoke many languages, English, German, Hebrew, you know, lots of different Russian and so on. And he read the originals, Latin, Greek. He was a classicist, his PhD was in classics. And he was a highly intellectual man and therefore Marxism has influenced a great many writers since, thinkers and literary figures. And that's, you know, that's undeniable and important. And he himself wrote a novel, which I think I'm going to have to read because it looks quite interesting. I've not read it yet. So yes, no, thank you, I take your point. Yes, okay, let's move on. What's the one you chose then?
Zoroastrianism.
Ooh, what fun. I like this one. Which one? There's several, aren't there? Which box is it?
Oh, 122.
Oh, right, there we are.
I've never heard of it before.
You've never heard of it?
No.
Oh, wow.
Seems to be one of your favorites most of
Well,
the
I
time.
love them all. They're all my favourite.
Do you guys know about Zoroastrianism?
Thanks to Thomas.
What about you, Armel? Do you come across it?
I don't remember at that time, but I will recover when you start to speak of it.
Okay, you'll remember. Okay. Well, I think this is interesting. I mean, it's the ancient religion of the Persian Empire. And as you know, the Persian Empire and the Greeks didn't get on. So it should be in the back of everyone's minds, who's a European, that this was the great religion of the Persians. And nowadays, Persia, or Iran as it's called, is very much in the news. And the world is teetering on a kind of, are we going to have World War III over Iran? And